believe, okay, so you guys should all be able to see me. I guess, let's just, I guess I should just say that I probably, Ben is going to be managing the chat like he mentioned earlier. I won't really be seeing it because I just can't really manage all of them at once. So if you do have questions, we will have a Q&A at the end, and I can answer those then, or Ben can answer them as they come up in the chat. But just know I probably won't see them, and I won't be responding to the raised hands if anyone's doing it. But Ben will try as best as he can. Let's see. I'm sorry. Yeah, so essentially just, I guess, let me just move some things around so I can see. Yeah, we're going to be covering the following themes over the next 9 weeks. And kind of Tim already mentioned all this, but the format of the course is, sorry, the course you guys have, that handbook, and you should have all the handouts and whatnot. And there's handouts that correspond to each of the classes. And you should have a handout for today that has what handouts go to each class. So you have about like 4 handouts for today. But yeah, this is what to expect. Again, like he said, there's 2 in-person workshops optional that would happen after the irrigation class and after the pruning class. So I think you mentioned the dates, which is February 6th and February 20th for those. Yeah, and like just to remind everyone, every week we only have 2 hours. So, and plus the 15 minutes of Q&A, we'll have like a 15-20 minutes of homework review in the beginning of the class. Obviously today we just did introductions, and then we'll have like a 5-minute break somewhere in the middle. So that only really leaves us with like a little less than an hour and a half of kind of me talking at you. So yeah, so if you guys can just save all the questions for the end as best you can, and we'll try to answer them. Yeah, so yeah, I think we've, let's see, go to the, okay. Yeah, so today we're just going to talk about the value of the certification, and then kind of the overview of a garden from install to kind of maturity, which we're kind of calling 4 years. And so just kind of what to expect, what it looks like, what are the kind of activities that you would be doing at a site visit for a garden. And oh yeah, and we said the 4 handouts for this week, you should have one that's the program outline, which just kind of has like basically what that last slide showed you with a little bit more detail. You have one handout that's about California native plants that just tells you what are California native plants and what are their benefits. That one's really great for just kind of all the statistics and nice little factoids about them. And then a planting guide for native plants. So that just gives you almost like a how-to on how to plant a native plant. And then there's the lawn alternative guide. And that is great step-by-step format on how to remove a lawn that you're going to install for native plants and all the different ways you can remove a lawn, including replacing it with an alternative lawn that might have native plants. So all those handouts are really, really informative. And I would really recommend you guys read them before the class or right after when it's all fresh in your head. But yeah, so I guess I'm just gonna jump into today's lecture essentially, which essentially, so yeah, we're just talking about the value of the certification. And essentially the certification is just a standardized professional curriculum aimed at landscape professionals, like we've talked about, and aimed at training them in maintaining native plant gardens. And the idea is to foster that behavior change that we want in the industry, right? So to move towards more sustainable landscapes. And the content is based on the best practices. And as we mentioned with a lot of people that introduced themselves that were part of creating that curriculum, it's got input from all the best practitioners in this field, and also input and from all these organizations that have related missions to this kind of theme. Let's see. Oh, so some obvious kind of values to the certification process are job qualification. So some of you already have jobs in this field, but essentially it's just having a credential says you're qualified to do this specialty service, right? or it could be just job advancement. So you already have a job, but now you can charge more potentially or command a higher price for your services because you are credentialed or because you have a certification. I think it's essentially also the last, like the kind of most important thing I think is the marketing part, which is like just this signal of quality. And it's like a mark of excellence. And it's an indicator to customers that a worker is qualified and competent to do this service and that they've met these like rigorous requirements to get this certification. So I think it's just a way to signal that you have a higher quality service because you have this certification, not just I have the experience. But aside from kind of those obvious, those obvious kind of reasons for wanting a certification, we have kind of a bigger picture, which is essentially, we're supporting like the bigger picture is kind of like wanting to support California native plants in the landscape and also supporting change in the industry. So it goes more towards sustainability, because we know as the climate changes that water becomes more scarce and the price of water is already going up, and customers are already feeling the price go up and those regulations and kind of the cracking down on excessive water use. And when we see that, like we know that the people are going to demand gardens that use less water, right? So there's going to be a need for people that can take care of those gardens, not just that we install them, but that there's a maintenance crew. And obviously this program is aimed at training those people, so we really want to bridge that gap of what we potentially see as something that's coming, which is a lot of people demanding these jobs and maintenance crews to do those jobs. So the reason though, I think the reason why not just water though, and why it's really important what we do in California is based off of kind of this map here that you guys can see, which is what we do in California really does matter, because you can see, so the cooler colors, the blue and stuff, indicate higher numbers of native plants that are endemic to that area. So that means when they're endemic, that means they just don't grow anywhere else, So when you see that California has a really high number of endemic species of native plants, which is unique. You can see in the rest of the United States, it's one of the few, it's the only state there that has that blue color. So that means that we have a lot of endemic species, and there are studies that show that native wildlife prefers strongly native plants. So it's also about this kind of creating habitat. It's not just about saving water, but it's also about creating habitat for native wildlife in our landscapes, in our gardenscapes, in our backyards, or in commercial areas. So yeah, it's just basically the whole point being that California native plant gardens are really just critical for the future of sustainable and ecologically minded gardening. The certificate program is, well, it's kind of what it says here, which is it is the only one that exclusively focuses on California native plants, which is cool. That's why it's this pilot program and it's new. And the idea is to meet the practical real world needs of gardeners, right? And to learn these specialized kind of needs of native plants. I'm gonna, hard for me too, there. Yeah, and these are kind of what we just already covered. Proves the marketability of your certified gardener. It makes your resume stand out. It provides customers with, proof that you have this demonstrated experience. And really importantly, it's backed by Theodore Payne and California Native Plant Society, which are these really respected names in native plant gardening. So having the certification means you kind of have the stamp of approval of these organizations. Using, like how you can use the certificate once you have your certification is mostly just being able to identify yourself as a certified landscaper, certified native plant landscaper. And you can put it on your business cards, any publications, any kind of social media presence that your business might have. You can, and if you're an employer of certified landscapers, since I don't think at this point we can certify like entities or companies, it's just certifying individuals. Business can say, hey, we have these certified individuals working for us. And yeah, you essentially can just use it in any kind of communication. You can also, you guys will receive these decals. I'm not sure what they look like, but you will receive them. You can put them on your car or wherever else you like to put decals, I guess. And yeah, also you guys as certificate holders and also your employers or homeowners or whoever's your client may be can obtain verification of your certification via Theodore Payne and the California Native Plant Society. So there will be kind of a record of who's a certified landscaper. And then also, obviously you just want to be proud of yourself doing a good job and working towards being certified. Yeah, the things you kind of get from the program, like the physical stuff you get, is you will get a certificate that you can frame if you want. You get the decals. I believe you get 5 of them. And also you get that, which I think is the kind of the coolest part, you get that listing on Theodore Payne's website and the California Native Plant Society's website about being a certified landscape maintenance or landscaper. Right, Tim?
Let me just chime in there right now. So part of our agreement with Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is, since they are funding this, we are not able to directly promote people or put them on lists on any one of our websites. So sorry for that miscommunication with you, Claire and Emerson, since you guys are here. So we just want to make that clear to everyone that you can use the certificate, your certification in any way that you see fit, but it's more of a liability issue for us and our partners that we are unable to directly promote individuals with the certificate program.
Got it. Cool. Thank you for clarifying. That's important. I thought that was a cool aspect of it, but never mind. I guess the coolest aspect now is the decals. Anyway, I think we're about to, oh, right. So kind of, we'll also talk about the financial aspects. We're going to talk about that in later courses, but just starting to realize the difference between native plant landscaping versus kind of that traditional turf landscaping. And it sounds like it's not clear to me, but it doesn't seem like a lot of you are doing the traditional turf landscaping, but there is a cost difference, obviously. With native plant landscaping, you're kind of doing fewer visits, but maybe you're spending more time per visit. It's a little bit more specialized and less mechanized and less kind of blow and go type of thing, and a lot more kind of hand pruning and whatnot. So it's just a little bit more of a specialty, which means you could potentially charge more for this specialty service, or charge the same, but you're working more hours because each visit takes longer. So we'll talk about that as we go through, and there's a whole lesson on it later coming up. I think, yeah, I wanted to just this is kind of a goofy little poll question that I wanted to pose before we take a break. Ben's gonna put it up, and I just wanted to use it because we'll probably be using the polling feature on Zoom in the future classes, but I just want to make sure it works and everybody kind of knows how to use it. And in case it doesn't, then I probably won't feature it so heavily in the next lectures. But yeah, this is just kind of a goofy one if you want. And everybody, if you can just choose whatever superpower that you would like. We can review the results after the break. We're going to take a 5-minute break. So you want to meet back here at essentially 6:01, I guess. But yeah, please, if you guys can, just submit your answers for the thing and we can review the results.
Did you say a 5-minute or a 15-minute break, Claire?
I'm going to do a 5-minute.
So that would be 5:51 then.
Did I say, oh, I'm sorry. I can't, I'm sorry, I can't read.
It's all good.
Thank you. So 5:51 when we come back. Thank you, Ben.
This is the 5 minutes to eat dinner for everyone. Carve it. Get a nice beverage. Just water.
Although there's no judgment here of beverages.
No, it's 6 o'clock. We all understand.
You're a judgment-free environment.
Yeah. It's like the dad X beer X COVID bod is very extreme right now. Claire, did I tell you too? We're gonna have another kid.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Congratulations.
Thank
Congrats.
you.
How
So-
far along are you guys? Well,
Baby girl is due in April. So-
nice.
Yeah, Remy's gonna have a little sister.
I like it. You got
You have a,
you
do you have a
won.
son now?
I do have a son now. Yeah,
How old?
he is 2.
Okay. Okay. I have a son and a daughter, although my kids are 3.5 years apart, but one of both is a good place to be.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
That's cool.
And we're moving like
Oh.
in the next month. We're actually gonna move relatively close to where your friends that you did that install is.
Oh,
actually.
Ryan and Evie.
Yeah,
yeah.
we're south of the 10 off Arlington. So
Nice.
gonna move and have another kid all together. I'm
Yeah.
already tired just thinking about it.
No, just do it. Get it. It's just make it as hectic as possible, like a hectic peak.
Yeah,
You know?
2021. Just
Yeah,
peak.
just- you're ready,
I'm
that's
not,
cool.
but it doesn't matter.
right?
You don't need to
how
be
old
ready
is-
yet.
No.
You can be ready later. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. How old is Remy?
He is 2, so he'll be exactly 2.5 when the next one's born. So
Got it. That's good.
2
good
kids
to-
in diapers. Yeah, it'll
Yeah.
be fun.
It's good though they're close. I'm really close to my sister. We're only 2 years apart, and I'm like, I don't understand doing it longer apart. I'm like, you gotta have a buddy.
Yeah, like my parents were crazy. They had a kid 14 years after me.
Mhm.
Insane.
Yeah. It's still fresh in your head, like changing diapers, how to do it, the whole thing.
Oh yeah,
Keep it
got it
fresh.
down. Although I gotta work on my swaddle game. That has come out of the head a little bit.
Right. Oh, I'm excited. That's cool.
Thanks. Looks like we're at our 5
Okay.
minutes here.
Cool.
Would you like me to end the poll, Claire?
Yeah. Let's see. Let's see what people like. What they
We
like.
have some clear winners here.
Really? I thought it would be even. I'm
I'm very surprised actually.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Apparently flying and talking to animals are in high demand. These
Okay. Guys, wow. I have to be honest. I said talking to animals, so I understand that crew really well.
I wasn't allowed to vote, Claire. I feel a little left out because I was the host, but that's okay.
Okay. That's the problem with being a host. You know, you're excluded from all cool polls. Rad, cool. Well, that's nice that it works. If anyone had any problems with that, maybe like let Ben know, because I do know all the different Zoom feed. Like if you're on iPad or whatever, it's hard. It's different to like, sign in. But I'm always doing my Zoom in the same way, so it seems easy for me. But yeah, maybe next week when we do Plant ID, we can do some more polling to just kind of have you guys more engaged and active, since today is not so much interaction on your part, unfortunately. Yeah, so I guess I'm just gonna assume everyone's back from their 5-minute break, and we're gonna talk about now like the kind of life of the garden, like I was saying, the overview and the time frame and what to expect in kind of from install to maturity. And just starting, simply, it's, here, sorry, I gotta start my, what is a garden, which is just a collection of softscape and hardscape that's put together in a consistent pattern that optimizes for health, plant health and aesthetics. And plants are plants are the softscape, just to be clear. And plants are also the most variable factor in it. And one of the big things with plants, for plants, it's like their first 2 years in the landscape really sets patterns for their health and like throughout their life. So it's kind of like that thing with kids, and the first 6 years of their life is really important. With plants, it's like the first 2 years of their life. are really important and really kind of set the stage for the rest of their life. And if they really struggle during that period, it can be hard for them to achieve kind of stable and like that attractive look of a healthy plant, so it's just really important, and you really want to focus on that. And it's especially important with native plants, and it's mostly because native plants aren't really bred for the neglect that are kind of regular exotic species that you tend to see in a traditional kind of garden. So they're just not bred for the same amount of neglect and toughness. Essentially, a lot of the exotic species have been domesticated for a way longer period of time. So they've just been around for a long time and have been selected for their survivability. Whereas native plants, they have been tended to by indigenous people, but they haven't been like systematically kind of hybridized for the industry of landscaping, or like in garden settings. So that's only a recent thing for native plants. It's mostly in the last 50 to 100 years. So it's just kind of to say that they really aren't set up to be beat up and they do need that 2-year period is really even more important with them, and for them to be healthy over their lifespan. Let's see, we got next slide, I think. Yeah, so we're just going to kind of go by year and kind of talk about from install to maturity, some of the activities that you would want to schedule into a maintenance visit. And I'm just kind of, it's kind of just a bunch of tidbits, and a lot of this stuff we're going to repeat later in other lessons. This is really more of an overview and with a couple of tidbits thrown in there. So I'm just going to kind of, run through it. And again, it's a little disorganized. Some of the slides don't match up perfectly, but it's first class, guys. So first, starting year one, it's a recently planted area. You're really going to have the most frequent visits at this point because it's a young garden, right? So you're talking weekly visits, probably 1 to 2 hours, and they generally require more. In general, a newer garden requires more attention than a well-established one. And the first year, the native plants are kind of just establishing slowly, and you might have, I don't know if anyone's heard this, but I didn't hear it till way late, but that little axiom, it goes with native plant gardening of like the first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap. And that kind of goes with their growth pattern a bit, not totally exact, but you can kind of just expect pretty slow development in the first year. And they're just sometimes those bigger plants are just maintaining their size, but potentially, improving or increasing their root ball size, but the size of their leaf canopy is kind of the same. So ideal planting season usually is the rainy season, or springtime. So right when it's still shorter days and we still have some rain, but it's not absolutely necessary. It's just, a little bit better. And so if you can't plant with the rainy season, you just have a little bit more work cut out for you, and you just have to be a little bit more extra vigilant about watering, right? So especially if there's any kind of like heat wave coming or Santa Ana's or something like that, you're going to want to be prepared for that and water accordingly. And you're basically just mimicking any kind of rain event. So if we also have a year like this where it's pretty dry rain year, you will be watering as if you were the rain, you're mimicking the rain. So but yeah, if you are caught in the situation where you're planting outside of the rainy season, you're just going to be watering early, and you could potentially add a temporary shade cloth or something like that. But yeah, you essentially want to just keep that in mind. Different plants, let's see. I think, we'll just go to this one. Still year one, your main activities are basically weeding and watering. Those are the activities that will take up most of your time. Weeds are kind of you just really want to be super vigilant that first year with weeding. And mostly because there's just a huge bank of seeds in your soil, and weed seeds are just waiting in your soil for their triggers which is essentially, a little bit of water, a little bit of sun, and soil disturbance, which in this photo you can kind of see is a perfect example of their perfect conditions, which is obviously the soil's disturbed. They've made some rain basins here in this photo, and she's obviously watering, and there's a lot of exposed soil because now you just have a bunch of 1-gallon small plants with not a ton of canopy to shade over where the weed seeds would be. So that just being said, that there's a lot of seeds that are just waiting to burst forth. So you really just want to be on top of it, and especially because they are going to produce the next generation of weed seeds. So you want to get on top of it early and make sure that you're weeding them out before they produce their seed heads and before they produce more seed. And that's so important in the first year, because as the years progress, the native plants start to outcompete them because they have shade canopy and there's less exposed soil on the ground for the weed seeds to kind of take over. Like, that's a niche that's open for them, right? So it's just really important. I can't really stress it enough that just weeding the first 2 years is a big deal, and just don't let your weeds go to seed in the first 2 years, because that just gives them the upper hand and they have more seeds to propagate, and then they can potentially outcompete the native plants that you've planted. Watering, again, is the second kind of most important activity in the first year. And I would say you're watering more frequent and less deeply than you will in the subsequent years in the first year. So you're watering more frequently than would be than in their mature phase. But that's obviously because they are less mature and their roots have not yet spread out into the soil. And really, the roots are basically bound by, with the natives or any plant, they're just bound by the container it's arrived in. And we really want to encourage the roots of that, those pot-bound roots, to spread out into the native soil around it. So that first winter, it's really important that there's regular soil moisture, so it encourages the roots to kind of move into the neighboring soil and not just stay in the shape of the root ball that they came in. And that's just going to require, again, like some vigilance on your part about how much rain is there happening right now. Is it, how much wind, how many Santa Ana's events are we getting? Is there a heat wave, stuff like that. So it's a little bit more nuanced in terms of what's the weather like for this new plant. And I mean, obviously, I think this is kind of easy to understand, but you want to concentrate your water kind of 2 to 3 inches away from the stem of the plant. You don't want to just water the stem. You like the same point I was trying to make. You really want to be watering kind of evenly and on that interface from where the root ball meets the native soil. So that's usually about 2 to 3 inches away from the stem. So you're just trying to water that area so the roots you're encouraging them to go to these moist areas and not just right on top of where the stem meets the soil.
I'll just want to chime in one thing about the weeds in the year one, which Claire, you're totally spot on. Usually the most prevalent weed pressure is going to happen in that first year because you have so little canopy coverage. In a lot of these urban gardens that might be neglected and the weed seed bank is really high. But if you're in a project if you have a project where you're in the position where you can prepare a year ahead of time or even 6 months ahead of time, you can do what's called dead bedding, which is a technique where you actually flush the weeds before you've done any of the installation or mulch or hardscaping. You're actually watering deeply, putting 2 or 3 inches down with an oscillator or whatever system you have to flush the weeds and then deal with them. In some instances, it's not advisable depending on the type of weeds, but if you have a large annual weed seed bank, it's really easy to water them, flush the weeds, and deal with them with whatever technique that you deem appropriate, whether it be chemical, mechanical, or some other method. And that can typically, if you're only 6 months out of your project, a lot of times you're going to be able to address the warm season weeds the easiest because you'll be prepping in the summer. But that's just one note. Particularly, I would say if you're doing meadow or wildflower installations, dead bedding is critical. If you go in and put a bunch of wildflower seeds on a bed where you haven't done any weed control prior to installation, all you're going to be doing is battling weeds and trampling the wildflowers that you're trying to establish. So our recommendation is you flush the weeds prior to installation. And if you're doing, a fall or a winter sowing, you can even get most of your weed seed to flush the month or 3 weeks prior to installation and mechanically or chemically take control of those weeds prior, and that'll at least get you a jump start on the weed control.
Cool. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, that's a great point. Because yeah, I'm kind of focusing on this kind of home scale garden and planting some like native plants with mulch around them. So that's a really good point for an alternative kind of planting plan. Let's see some other activities for year one. As you can see, there's mulch here, and there's just, you know, the first, oh wait, before mulch, fertilizing, you don't want to fertilize. You don't need to fertilize. Native plants are adapted to these low fertility soils, and really fertilizing is for, it really encourages rapid kind of green growth on the top. And that's at the expense of the roots, which the whole point of this first year is, or two, is to establish the root systems of these native plants. So it's really, we don't really want to fertilize at all. And even if you're in this rare case where you have these like extremely disturbed soils, you maybe the only kind of fertilizing I would do would be to like top dress with some organic compost, which is pretty light compared to like what normally people would use as a fertilizing for like a new plant installation. So yeah, just a note on fertilizing. Mulch, you can see here, you want to mulch the whole thing. You want to keep it at 2 to 3 inches. I believe for the rebate program for the LEDW, oh no, the SoCal Water Smart rebate program, it needs to be 3 inches. But the mulch is important that you just have there for, again, weed seeds and keeping them at bay, and also, you know, moderating the temperature of the soil, and so that there's just not a bunch of exposed soil. You don't want to have the mulch right up to the neck of the plant. You just want to make sure that you got the little air there for the stem. And let's see, I say plant list, mulch. Oh yeah, sowing wildflowers. I think this is a great option, especially because on a first year install, it looks kind of more like a mulch garden, unless like there's a lot less ratio of plant to mulch. So you want, like, sowing wildflowers is always an option in the first year. You can sow with the rain, or you can sow outside of it, obviously, but you just, like any seed, you need to keep, they need consistent kind of moisture to germinate. And with wildflower seeds, you want to make sure you kind of scratch them into the soil and water very gently. And that could be on, you know, gently and passively. You don't want to just like create divots and kind of just spray at them, obviously. I think seeds are pretty no-brainer. But anyway, sowing wildflowers to fill in that empty space that you have is always an option and an extra thing you can charge for. Let's see, so wildflowers, staking, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer, staking anything that's kind of long and leggy that needs the help, but most things will be pretty short and small and maybe don't need to staking at this point. Let's see.
I'll just chime in one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna chime in. So staking, you know, we see a lot of poorly staked plants in the landscape, and that's typically when you have 2 stakes and that are tightly bound to the tree or whatever you're doing. Whatever you do when you're staking, you want to make sure that the plant can still move. You don't want it to be rigidly staked or leave the stake right on the trunk of the tree wrapped with the tape that came in from the nursery. If your plant comes staked from the nursery, we recommend taking that stake out and putting the stake 6 inches to 1 foot away from the trunk if it's a large specimen on either side, and loosely staking it from either side of the tree. If it's something like a fragile monkey flower, what you can do is stake really close and tie near the base of the trunk loosely to make sure that it doesn't snap in wind. And, you know, some plants like sticky monkey flowers, gambelias, some salvias even, if they are a little bit leggy, you know, staking will help keep them from breaking in a heavy wind situation.
Yeah, also putting like a nice big rock, if you have access to them. Obviously rocks are more expensive, but sometimes a nice big rock next to a small thing like a monkey flower or something can also be like a kind of improvised stake until the plant has a little bit more girth and people actually see it and don't stomp on it or crush it. Let's see, so year 2, you are doing fewer visits. You can kind of move to the bi-monthly visits. You can see the plants start to kind of increase in their size, but they're not like full size by any means yet. They're just starting to kind of take a little bit up, a little more space. Some of the activities are pruning. A lot of these, well, I guess there's something to be said for, knowing the size of each species and their kind of max size. You guys, I think everybody should have gotten these already, which we're gonna use next week's class in Plant ID. But essentially it has all these kind of really common native plants in Southern California gardens. And it has this really helpful thing about what max size they get to. And those are important to know because you want to know how big is this plant supposed to be, how woody, things like that, because you don't want to be pruning. A lot of them don't really like to be pruned into their hardwood and they don't do well with that. So it's just learning the skill is kind of learning the nuances of all the different varieties and all their different kind of needs. So pruning, yeah, cutting grasses back, that's kind of an annual thing that you'll be doing. With the watering, you're going to start reducing the irrigation frequency in that second summer for sure. But you also want to apply enough to wet that top 18 inches. So they're still kind of establishing, but you are reducing the amount of water the frequency at which you're watering them. And especially like in heavier clay soils or areas where runoff is a problem, you can do kind of like short applications of water and then just let that water soak in and then repeat to get to that kind of 18-inch saturation that you want. Let's see, am I on? Yeah, and then, so yeah, obviously you're always kind of checking irrigation. If that's definitely something that can happen where a broken sprinkler head or whatever, or a non-functioning one leads to a plant that dies. So you definitely want to replant that if it's an issue that's obvious like that you can fix, like, oh, the sprinkler just wasn't functioning, or potentially replanting something that's just not doing well. If it's not doing well, it's kind of, you have to start to kind of figure out why. Is it a cultural issue that's something you can fix, or is it something like a plant that a clay loving soil plant living in a really sandy soil? So it's just finding those needs. You guys have a really awesome list of clay loving plants that is a handout associated with the third class on soils. We'll get to it, but it's a really great list of clay loving plants that's super helpful. I think, let's see, so replanting, again, you're still weeding, you're staying on top of that in the second year. That's still want to be pretty vigilant about it. The staking thing that Tim said, sometimes, well, in year two, actually, Tim, maybe what you can say, but in year two, depending on the plant, you can remove the stake or leave it in or make it looser. Like, if you have, kind of bring it out. The stakes, like he said, if you're putting them 6 inches to a foot away, you could bring them out to be wider. But Tim, maybe you want to make a point on that.
No, I think that's good. I mean, you have to kind of adapt those supports as the plants change, right? So it's a progressive thing, gardening. So if the trunk has a thick enough caliper where you're not worried about windfall or wind damage, then removing the stake completely is totally acceptable. And if it's an oak tree that's now reached, if you planted it as a 24-inch box, now it's pretty well rooted, you can safely remove the stakes. And it kind of, condition environment. Are you in a really high wind area versus, an area less prone to high winds?
Cool. Yeah, thank you. You can also still sow wildflowers the second year, especially if there's some bare areas still in the garden. This is a nice picture of a pretty filled out garden, but in the second year, you still might have some bare patches, and maybe the wildflowers from the year before didn't seed as profusely as you wanted. So you could always reseed and charge again, for the seeds that you provide. Or you can do like 4-inch, you can buy 4-inch pot or 4-inch wildflowers or 1 gallons that just kind of, it's like a faster way to get up to the size and color that you might want for wildflowers. So that's completely up to the client, I suppose. It's a price point thing. Let's see, we got the year 3. Okay, yeah, so year 3, you're still, actually, I think there was a note about, with mulch in the second year, really, you don't really need to be replacing the mulch, or you shouldn't have to, but you will, if there is an issue, like it's blowing away in the wind, or you're losing it with the irrigation, you're losing a lot of mulch, you'll notice that in the second year, and that's something that you can plan for and plan to charge for, or mention, give the heads up to a homeowner or whatever, that would be something. But it's not normally something that you continue to reapply, but you will definitely know by second year, like, oh wow, we're losing a bunch. So the third year, twice a month visits, still, it's a kind of twice a month visits is pretty standard. And you're weeding less for sure, because mostly you're starting to see them take their kind of mature shape. So that thing we were saying with the sleep, creep, leap, the third year is like the leap. And this is kind of when it starts to really become its mature shape. And you actually really can see like how big everything is going to be. And it's really obvious also when things become obvious of whether or not you've overplanted. And typically, I mean, I am totally guilty of this myself. You overplant, because it's just that mulch garden look that's just mulch and like a few plants is just not what you want. You just want this full lush thing, and you're always going to mess up and plant way too much. And so by the third year, it becomes really obvious, and things start to get pretty crowded looking, and like I would even say chaotic. So yeah, you'll notice if any of these low growing things are starting to merge together, or even in this photo, it's kind of a good example, but like well, not all of them, but some plants get really vertical because they have no space to go sideways. So that might be a sign that you're actually kind of overcrowded. And there are things that you can plant densely, which is like Solidago, Achillea. You can plant pretty densely, and they can handle it. Not all of them are going to require that much space, but several of the kind of hits like Cleveland sage or something like that really want a little bit more space. Let's see.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be something that we address throughout the course, right? Is kind of how to address plant size issues, whether it's can I control it with pruning, or it's a point that I try to drive home in the courses that I have taught at Theodore Payne for more just residential gardeners, is that don't be afraid to pull out plants. I think dealing with professionals, you guys maybe are a little less sentimental than other people that like, this plant is my life, I can't take it out, even though it's in the worst place possible. Culling the plants is really a rejuvenating process for the rest of the garden. And a lot of times we design it to be full year one, but like Claire said, by year three, really it's part of that progression of the garden to cull the perennial herbs, the shorter lived plants, and really let the long lived woody shrubs take over and anchor the garden on a more permanent basis. And so culling plants over time, it's a great way to incorporate more fees for charging to make sure the garden looks good, and to reduce that cluttered look, which I think is one of the impediments on a larger scale for people embracing native plants, because they say they look crazy. And that's because most native plant gardens are installed by home gardeners and plant nerds and people who just love plants and want all the plants in their garden, and don't do that culling that needs to happen by year three and pull things to allow plants to reach their optimum quality and size. Would you rather have 100 plants that are 50% optimum, or 20 plants that really are beautiful at maturity and you have not compromised their health overall? So that's what I'll say about that.
Right. No, I think too, also, I mean, you kind of said this, but the overcrowding isn't just kind of chaotic looking, but a lot of plants, they'll get aphids, or they have more predation on them when there's just so much crowding, because they are actually weaker. So they just really can't protect themselves against whatever predation of bugs or aphids or whatever kind of plague might befall on them. So it's also a health thing. It's not just like it looks crazy, though I love the crazy, I must say. So yeah, pulling or just selectively pruning out or selectively removing plants that just are too big or getting too unruly, or just pruning unruly growth. That's something that's definitely a year three thing, because it just gets really obvious. Replanting, that's a kind of a no-brainer. You're going to replant anything that's not really making it, or just didn't thrive, or again, it'll become obvious that it's like doesn't want to be in this situation. If something's really struggling and it's been struggling the last 2 years, it might be a sign that it's just not the right plant for the right space. weeding gets to be less because, as you saw in the other ones, there's a lot more coverage. So it's just going to be whatever weed seeds fall in to your garden or birds bring in. And it's usually just kind of weeding, it's kind of spot treatment weeding on the edging or on the edges, or, you know, stubborn little patches of Bermuda grass and stuff like that. And of course, you're always, oh, and I guess, well, yeah, so the watering, we're definitely watering less at this point. It's now you really want to get into that infrequent deep watering, and you want to be doing that, you know, throughout the year. Like summer, you're just doing probably, oh, sorry, we were going to be doing like a deep watering and stuff like that. But like maybe if you show up at the visit, you can do the watering while you're there, this for the week or whatever, for every 2 weeks. But you can also kind of consider just like spritzing the garden, like to kind of like make it look clean and fresh before you leave. You don't want to spritz the garden every day, but you're just probably doing your bi-monthly visit, so it won't be a harmful thing. Year 4, similar. It's like kind of now the garden's kind of getting into its like regular routine visits, because now it's mostly established and you still do these twice monthly visits, but your main activities are going to be pruning and kind of just monitoring the garden and making sure stuff like nothing's dying or going crazy, or irrigation monitoring, stuff like that. It's really, oh, and then, and like this mulch thing, really the plants at this point are going to be regularly replenishing their own mulch. You don't need to be, at this point, you shouldn't have to be bringing in any mulch. And also, not only are the plants kind of shedding their own mulch, they should have a large enough canopy to where they're kind of shading their own roots, and they don't really need that thick mulch anymore. And yeah, you're going to be pruning any kind of trimmed, crossed branches, dead stuff, broken stuff, unruly growth. It's mostly that. And hand pruning is, you know, kind of time consuming. You know, one salvia could take 30 minutes to prune. So it is going to be the main activity, which is cool. That's like the fun one. It's funner than weeding, I think. Well, it depends on who you are. And then, yeah, weeding, we talked about that. Replanting, same, you might be adjusting sprinkler heads, and all of that stuff just starts to become a little bit easier. And really it's just kind of a monitoring thing, and maybe taking photos of this garden to monitor it and kind of keep eyes on its aesthetic and its health. You also can, at this point, I mean, I think you could apply earlier, actually. Tim, somebody from TPF can correct me, but apply for the Native Plant Garden Tour, which is rad. And they're super cool. And like this garden looks beautiful at this point. And maybe that's why I wait till year 4, because it's a little filled out. But yeah, that's something you can do. And that's great marketing for anyone. You know, I've seen the tours, and sometimes they bring the gardener on who maintains it, or bring on the designer. So it's just a great way also to kind of network in this world and industry of native plant landscaping. We have a few slides of, I believe, a former native plant tour participant. I think his name's Frank. But yeah, so this is essentially Frank's house, kind of from install, prior to installing the natives, to I think about a little over 2 years old. And just to kind of give an example of, you know, the process. And I believe he put in like a whole layer of kind of like this gravel, which we don't actually really encourage in the course. But here it is with the plants all spaced out. And then that's obviously like install day. This is still year 1, but after the rainy season. So you can see he took advantage of this, sowing the wildflowers. All those orange poppies there are basically filling in that empty space, because those plants just haven't filled in their size yet. So it's a nice kind of seasonal approach. It's really about that with the native plants. It's just looking at this seasonally. So hiding those tiny plants a little, or not hiding them, but maybe having some wildflowers to, you know, fill in the space. And then this one is, I believe, at 2 years and prior to the rainy season. So now you can see the native plants have started to like really fill out, and they're starting to fill out the space more. And the wildflowers are not in, well, there's a few, but they're not really the main attraction anymore. So they're starting to it's starting to take on its kind of mature structure at this point. And I think there's one more picture. Yeah, so this is same kind of time frame, second year, but with post rainy season. So it has those wildflowers still mixed in there, but the native plants have more of their full size. Yeah, and so that's basically, yeah, that's kind of just a general overview of just a garden from install to maturity, and just us thinking more on this kind of seasonal approach and not just this standard, we just go blow, it's the same thing every day, same thing every month of the week. It's really, you are going to be doing a more nuanced thing of providing this kind of service that is more seasonally based. I think that's it for in terms of the slides for this week. The homework you guys have is like pretty easy and I think kind of fun. But you're just going to take 5 pictures of native plants and you're going to send them to me by the next class. And my email is there in the slide, claire.acosta@gmail.com. And you can send me those, and any questions you guys have too, you can send me. If you're not sure if it's a native plant, just send it anyway, because there might be somebody else who doesn't know. And so it just could be helpful. We can, go over it, because we're going to go over it in the plant ID class, which is next week. And, it'll just be helpful to have a bunch of your guys' pictures, and even ones that maybe you're not sure about. So yeah, definitely that's homework. Send them to me before the next class. Try not to send them right an hour before the class starts, because I have to get them in the slideshow. So yeah, try to send them the day of at least, but maybe give me a heads up or whatever. So yeah, I think we're gonna stop. We ended kind of early, which is great.